Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back to School of Emo. Today we are continuing our Emo's Not Dead cruise prep by going through some of the bands on the cruise. And today we're lucky, I guess, because we have a new band that got added. We found out just maybe a week or so ago that one of the band's mom jeans had to drop out. And so the band that is filling their place is Saves the Day. And I honestly didn't know that much about Saves the Day, which shows, I think, how little I was deeply invested in the scene. Also being from Arkansas and not being in, the Northeast scene at the time. But I learned a lot through this prep. And so I find this to be a very interesting conversation. And at the end, as we talk about some developments and what this return may look like, I think we have a lot to discuss, especially for those of you who are also fans of brand new. I kind of feel like maybe, maybe some people are treated different than others. So I don't know. We'll talk about it. But with Saves the Day coming on the ship, people were very excited. And the reason why is that Saves the Day, whether you like them, you hate them, whatever you think about what happened later on, a little hint, you can't deny how impactful they were in the emo space. And especially going into that third wave of emo, we could say that they were technically right on the coattails of the second wave and most highly influenced by the second wave, especially being from that, like the part of the country that they're in, like Jersey. And so it's interesting to see their impact and how they have evolved and just kind of where they stand today. And it does make sense that people are really excited. So we're going to go all the way back to 1997 in Princeton, New Jersey, which was already a hotbed for emo and kind of this post-punk space in the late 90s. We talked about this with Thursday, right? My Chemical Romance came out of this era. There was a lot of this movement happening in this space and in New Jersey as a whole, in the Northeast as a whole. The band was founded by Chris Conley, who became that unmistakable voice and emotional core of the group. And while early lineups shifted very frequently, Conley and then the drummer, Brian Newman, remained constant. And apparently, Chris and Brian had started a band together at age 13, kind of that becoming eventually Saves the Day. And the band was originally not named Saves the Day. They were called Seffler. Thank God they got rid of that. But whenever in about 1997-ish, so right around their start, there was a lyric from a song called Hero by the band Farside. And the lyric is, I want to be the one who saves the day. And so one of their friends and then future bassist for the band, Sean McGrath, suggested the name while the band was recording demos, kind of pulling from that song lyric. And so the name began to kind of mean how to succeed in preventing failure or a bad outcome, fitting the band's heartfelt and often dramatic music, which is really interesting. So they landed on the name and they started playing music. They started very much emo, underground basements, all of that. And then in 1998, they released their debut album, Can't Slow Down, on Equal Vision Records. So with a label right away. It was raw, fast, deeply emotional, pulling influence from the hardcore, punk, and second wave emo bands like Lifetime, Texas is the Reason. And the lineup for this original kind of first album was Chris Conley, and then we had Brian Newman on drums, Anthony Anastasio on guitar, Justin Gaylord also on guitar, and then Sean McGrath on bass. Chris, in a quote, kind of looking back on this time, said, I didn't know how to write songs any other way than being completely honest. And that showed up lyrically in this album because the songs, the lyrics dealt with betrayal, heartbreak, and self-doubt, themes that would kind of define them for decades and be kind of core of who they were, really fitting into the emo genre and the emo space as a whole. Some fans believe that songs on Can't Slow Down reference the same broken relationship, kind of creating this unofficial narrative arc across the album, but that wasn't necessarily confirmed or anything by the band. It's just sort of the theory based on the different lyrics throughout the songs. So, taking on the momentum of the underground space with their first album in 1999, they released Through Being Cool. And that's where everything really kind of springboarded and changed for them. So, this became a cornerstone of what would be defined as kind of emo pop, influencing a generation of bands that followed and really leaning into what was coming in that second wave of emo that we see in the early 2000s. We had Chris Conley still on vocals, David Soloway on lead guitar, Eben DiMaggio on bass, Brian Newman still on drums, and Ted Alexander came in on rhythm guitar. And it was interesting because he was kind of described as a roadie at the time, who sort of latched onto the band and started playing with them and kind of made his way into the band kind of early on. So songs like Shoulder to the Wheel, Rock's Tonic Juice Magic, and You Vandal combined that emotional urgency with the pop punk speed and melody, kind of leaning into what this emo pop, emo punk, whatever we wanted to call it, would be. This record blurred the line between the underground emo scene and more mainstream punk, which paved the way for, again, that third wave of emo, bands like New Found Glory, Fall Out Boy, early Taking Back Sunday, kind of what was going to explode in the early 2000s. Saves the Day was kind of right in line with that evolution from that second wave of emo and making music a little bit more mainstream and accessible, but just kind of redefining the look versus the more hard kind of punk post-hardcore style. Through Being Cool did not necessarily explode on radio, but it did spread through word of mouth, burned CDs, basement shows. And for most people who were considered emo in the early 2000s, this album was part of your rotation and found you. So it kind of spread like wildfire as most of that, what then again became the third wave, was really exploding around this period of time in different parts of the country. Many fans cite Through Being Cool as the first emo album that made them feel seen, even if they didn't fully understand why at the time, likely because of the lyricism. So looking at Shoulder to the Wheel lyrics, and I say just go, please Dave, just drive. Get as far can be. Get us away from tonight. And I say I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell, but I'm having a bad week and I miss my mom. We drive. Dave steps on the gas. The world that's flying by is slick and smooth. Big waves of light. The radio is playing Queen. We're rocking out and we're going now. Because, hey, this is it. This is where we are. Out here where silence is. 70 miles an hour. Windows up tight. And I am home. We drive. Dave steps on the gas. The world that's flying by is slick and smooth. Big waves of light. The radio is playing Queen. We're rocking out. We drive. So it's very interesting kind of storytelling, which we see in kind of country singer-songwriter, kind of indie spaces, Americana spaces, but interesting to see woven in to this kind of more emo space, which is very different than like a punk or heavier rock at the time. So in 2001, we got the album Stay What You Are, which is arguably the band's most beloved album, and fans will kind of debate whether they could ever move on from this album. You know, we all have, I feel like all the bands around this time had that one album that was hard to really get past, and this seemed to be part of that. The production was a lot cleaner, the melodies were bigger, the lyrics were still painfully honest, so it was kind of the best of what the band offered. And we still had Chris Conley on vocals, still had David Soloway on lead guitar, still had it even DeMacchio on bass, Brian Newman on drums, Ted Alexander on rhythm guitar, and then they added Richard Barron for organ on track 3 only. So kind of an unofficial sort of addition to the band. Now, this gave us one of the biggest kind of emo anthems that is out there, and that is At Your Funeral. It was introspective, vulnerable, and quietly devastating, kind of that perfection of an emo lyric. So we're going to read them. This song will become the anthem of your underground. You're 2 floors down, getting high in the back room. If I flooded out your house, do you think you'd make it out? Or would you burn up before the water filled your lungs? And at your funeral, I will sing the requiem. This song will become the anthem of your underground. You're 2 floors down, getting high in the back room. If I flooded out your house, do you think you'd make it out? Or would you burn up before the water fills your lungs? At your funeral, I will sing the requiem. I'd offer my hand. It would hurt too much to watch you die. And you can bet when we mourn the death of you that night, they'll lay me on the dinner table. I will be the pig with the apple in my mouth, the food that celebrates your end. And at your funeral, I will sing the requiem. I'd offer you my hand. It would hurt too much to watch you die. And at your funeral, I will sing the requiem. I'd offer you my hand. It would hurt too much to watch you die. In an interview looking back on this song, Chris said, that song was about realizing that you can love someone deeply and still need to walk away in the most emo way. So this era marked Saves the Day's kind of closest brush that they had with mainstream success. They were on MTV, they were doing major tours, Warped Tour, they had a growing national fan base, and there were even headlines of the time saying Saves the Day brings emo to the masses without losing its soul. So they seem to find that perfect blend of the acceptance for within fans and the scene as in itself, but also in a bigger mainstream audience. And for many fans, Stay What You Are represents the emotional peak of Saves the Day, the perfect balance between that rawness and accessibility. But while fans love this album, it also wasn't always greeted with the best reviews, including from Pitchfork, which was a big music magazine from that time. And fans even look back on that. I was reading through a Reddit thread, not that many years ago, kind of talking about this debate of why this album didn't get quite as much acclaim as it may have deserved. It probably doesn't get looked back on for that reason either. But within the scene itself and within the fandom itself, it was such a big success and seemed to be that as close to perfection as the band could get for their sound. But then they did decide to kind of throw a little bit of a curveball in 2003 by releasing In Reverie, which was complicated among fans and critics alike. This album moved away from more of that pop punk sound and more towards more an indie rock and experimental sound, which a lot of bands kind of did in the late 2010s after kind of that emo wave dropped. So it's interesting to see that this band started that experimentation earlier, but they started it at the time of peak emo, and what they were providing before like would have been at its peak in those early 2000s. What was also interesting from this album on is we start to see Chris's voice change. So he began changing his voice around this time because the way he was singing was a bit too harsh on his vocal cords, and that would become noticeable again from this album and even more noticeable throughout future albums. For this album, fans also believe the sound overall kind of shifted away from true emo, which leaves it more controversial among fans as either you love it or you hate it. And you even see that within their streams, like from this album on, things did kind of start to go downward. So looking at this time, Chris in an interview said, I didn't want to keep writing the same record over and over again. So the band was trying to evolve, trying to be creative, but it did sort of split fans a bit and kind of created this turning point where Saves the Day was going to be changing, and future albums may follow. Also following In Reverie, Chris began to open up publicly about his struggles with mental health and substance abuse, themes that were kind of more increasingly appearing in the band's music. And then they started releasing albums like Sound the Alarm in 2006, Under the Boards in 2007, all diving into the themes of addiction, isolation, and self reflection. And these records are a lot heavier emotionally. They're less nostalgic, they're more confrontational, kind of going back to that emo sound from that indie rock experimental sound, but not hitting quite as much like the earlier albums did. And Chris said in an interview that during this time, I was writing from a place of survival. So from Sound the Alarm, we have the end lyrics. Cut off my pair of limbs, put off what's left within. When I'm limited, time to face the end. Smile for the camera, suck in that gut. Don't shame your family, you'll have bad luck. Oh, the world is waiting to see you when you fall. Crack up and come from the senior prom. Faded red dress on the neighbor's lawn. Oh, the whole world is waiting to see when you fall. The whole world is waiting to see when you fall. I'm a danger to myself, always blaming someone else. Got a grenade in my mouth and my finger on the pen, ready to rip it out. Yeah, that's right. Cut off my pair of limbs. Put off what's left within. When I'm limited, time to face the end. So then in the 2010s, Saves the Day continues to release new music. Daybreak in 2011, Saves the Day, kind of self-titled in 2013, Nine in 2018. And they're leaning into more maturity, healing, and self-acceptance. But in 2021, another curveball. Chris actually got hit with some allegations regarding sexual misconduct and grooming. And this all really takes place on Instagram. So the Instagram account, your.bandsucks, uploaded several screenshots to a story highlight documenting instances of abuse, harassment, and allegations of sexual misconduct against Chris. So the instances of abuse are said to have happened and taken place between March and December of 2020. And in the story highlight, they shared screenshots of messages that were exchanged, frantic series of missed calls, oftentimes placed just minutes apart, accusations of unsolicited nude photos, and blatant admissions of submission of nude photographs by Conley himself. There were also messages in which the frontman sent screenshots of countdown timers, including how long it would be before another call would be placed. So a little bit of kind of obsession, maybe stalking. And the recipient of this messages, who was a younger man at the time, repeatedly asked Conley to disengage in communication. Please leave me alone, man. That was unbearable. Read one reply, and another just said, just stop, man. Both of which were met with follow-up messages from Chris, one being a selfie photo. He did respond to this officially and took responsibility for many of the allegations, which he said were greatly mishandled, while also detailing his own struggles with sobriety and the inability to manage his own emotions. So, reading his full statement, I'm writing this statement to address the recent story about me and how I greatly mishandled a relationship with an old friend. I wildly misjudged the dynamic between us, and I lost control of my ability to communicate and interact in a healthy manner due to my alcoholism and many errors in judgment. I mistook what I thought were genuine cues to engage in intimacy from afar, and I instigated a weeks-long, long-distance affair. When it became toxic, I was unable to pull myself from its grasp, and I spiraled, losing my mind along the way and making an unacceptable number of inappropriate missteps, causing irreversible harm. I'm truly ashamed and embarrassed by my abhorrent behavior, and I'm sorry. This behavior does not reflect the level of character I've strived to uphold throughout my career and in my relationships, and I take full accountability for my actions. I will not attempt to hide from the truth or to spin this story. All of this happened, and there are pictures to prove it. I would, however, like to clarify that some of the images you may have seen were altered to paint a certain picture of me, and I'm particularly troubled by the grooming claims, which do not reflect the true nature of the relationship, as toxic as it was in other regards. That being said, what is true is damning enough, and I cannot pretend to expect to be forgiven or hope to recover from this. The damage is done. It is my fault. I've been emotionally unstable my entire life, and I sometimes wrestle with severe anger management issues. Suffering from depression for decades drove me to drink to a dangerous degree, and I struggled daily to maintain my sobriety but continue to fail. None of this excuses my insensitivity or careless conduct, and it is shockingly clear to me how obviously oblivious I was. My inability to process my emotions in a healthy manner and my failure to address my own personal problems made life miserable for someone whom I have cared about. I wish I'd taken the critical steps I needed to correct the course of my life a million years ago, but I did not. I will do everything possible to make healthy improvements moving forward. I know I've let some of you down, but I'm grateful for the moments of joy we were fortunate enough to share over the last 24 years. I wish you all nothing but the best while I work toward the challenges necessary to improve my behavior and, more importantly, improve how I interact with those around me. There was never in person, kind of leaning off of this statement, there was never in person abuse, but this did bring up a lot of discussion among fans, surprisingly less about the misconduct itself, but about his sexuality, because this was between him and a man. And there were some debates on whether he was bisexual or gay. And if earlier lyrics kind of leaned into that, like kind of looking through fans' reactions to this. I wasn't following this at the time. I wasn't deep in the fandom, but finding what I could through like Reddit threads, it seemed like his sexuality was like the main point of conversation, which I find really interesting. And because of these allegations, they did cancel all of their shows and they sort of took a break and stopped. But it wasn't the end for Saves the Day because they seem to be making their comeback. They produced a lullaby album that was mostly covers of their songs by Sparrow Sleeps in 2025. They seem to be returning to touring. They're on the Emos Not Dead cruise in just 2 weeks. They're also doing a festival in Kentucky in February. And I'm trying to find some talk about this because this really threw me off. This was something I was very much unaware of. And so I again was trying to search through like the posts. And when they announced Emo's Not Dead announced their addition to the cruise, people were extremely excited. And I didn't see a lot of negative pushback. And even digging again through Reddit and through all the different threads I could find through social media, I didn't really see much pushback or thought about this and any of these allegations that came up and what he admitted to. And it brings up an interesting conversation looking at the Jesse Lacey brand new history. And even with this, there's some the grooming of, the guy at a younger age, then kind of going into adulthood. Like there's some unknowns about some of this story. Whereas like with Jesse, like the allegations were definitely with younger women at the time. And maybe it's all about taking an accountability where Jesse took lightly kind of accountability and just sort of re-entered the space this year. But any post about Jesse Lacey or brand new over the last year with their shows, even shows here in Nashville, but their tour, they were met with so many fan reactions about how he was a predator, like he was unsafe. And the allegations for him were all like 20 plus years ago. This was not that long ago for Chris. And we're not seeing that same kind of reaction happening. And is it because Saves the Day is not quite as big as Brand New was at the height of all of this? Is it the timing of these allegations coming through where like the fandom itself and their fans are in a different age demographic to maybe not care as much? Is it because it was male on male versus male on female? Is it all about age? I think it brings up a really interesting conversation. I don't think that we should like continue to take the axe to Save the Day because of these allegations. Like he took ownership, and if we see changes in behavior, I think that's important. I think that's also important to share with Brand New and Jesse Lacey. But I would love your thoughts because I do think it's really interesting, and it makes me really curious about the cruise itself and like those interactions, because seeing them added, I didn't have a lot of opinion. Obviously there are a few songs of theirs that I love. At Your Funeral is a hit. Everyone knows that song in this space, whether Saves the Day or not. So I'm familiar with it, and I was looking forward to a set or so, maybe at least one set by them. But I didn't know so much, and digging into earlier research, earlier albums, I was getting so excited thinking about, oh, these lyrics are really interesting. Like I need to go back and like really read through these and kind of understand these. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that's like live. And then getting to this part of their history, I found it really interesting. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of torn. Like I don't really know how I feel about this. I'm going to see them, right? And again, see how people react to them and what that acceptance, I guess, is like. But it's interesting. So would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to share, leave a positive review with your thoughts or go onto YouTube where you can leave comments because I am curious what you think. But whatever you think, it is undeniable that Saves the Day paved the way for a lot of what happened through the third wave of emo and emo as we experience it today. They had an impact on the music scene, and even Pete Wentz. This is widely kind of cited, his statement, but he said Saves the Day taught us how to write honest songs. So some of the biggest bands that we know of really got inspiration from what Saves the Day created early on, and we can't deny that. So your homework is to go listen to those few albums, like the early three albums, and then take a listen to In Reverie. Form your own opinion. What do you think about the sound change there? What do you think about that experimentation? Do you like it? Do you not? What are your opinions? And then let me know your other opinions. I'm going to give you that as a homework assignment about Chris and the allegations and what we think about that moving forward in that broader discussion. And then next week, we will wrap up our emo prep of bands. We're going to talk about Hot Mulligan and kind of make it back to the Midwest emo scene and a little bit of a later on kind of newer phase of the scene as a whole. And then we're going to prep for the cruise, and then we'll be ready for a cruise recap. So we are almost there, and I'm so excited to share some of that with you. If you want to come on the podcast after all of this, after the cruise, if you have a band you really want to talk about, a topic you want to talk about within this space, opinions you want to share, songs you love that you could discuss, please do go to show notes. You'll find the email. I would love to chat with you and have you on. It is very much open and welcome for anyone who wants to come on and share. So do that. And I will see you in next